Hey, everybody. So I know it's been a minute, right, since we've done a broadcast, but there's been a lot happening over the last couple of weeks around the country and even around the world, but specifically in the country. And so tonight's broadcast, I'm excited to do because, I get to talk to some folks that I appreciate and admire back home in Northeast Tennessee. And then we get to talk about an issue that is near and dear to my heart, and kind of get some things going and go from there. So I'm going to make sure that I can see this and that we're all good on my end. And there it is. Edit here. Go here. I'm done. Change. And we are good. We are good to go. All right, folks. So, hi, everybody. Say hi when you get in here. Do me a favor. This is a broadcast that is very important, and I want to make sure that information gets shared with people who really want to hear about this issue, know about this issue, help do something that fixes some of the challenges that we're in. So make sure that you like this video. Make sure that you share this video. Hey, Jennifer, how are you? What's up, Mookie? How are you? What's up, Brett? How you guys doing? I just got all my settings straight, so we should be good to go now, so that folks can actually see this on my other page. Hey, Deborah, how are you? So I'm gonna give it a second for you guys to get in here, right? And let me see if I got this good and going the way that I want it to. Yes, I do. Yay me! Look at that. All right. So for those of you guys who live, what's up, Tootie? How are you? How is everybody? You guys good? To all you folks who might be watching the replay, hi, how are you? Sorry you couldn't join us live, but glad that you're watching afterwards. So let me just give you guys a little bit of background. Tonight, I'm going to be joined by two individuals back home in Northeast Tennessee in Kingsport that I know, like, and admire. One of them is Michael Gillis. He is the CEO and director of Hunger First, which is a nonprofit organization. And he's going to come on here in a minute to tell you a little bit about him and what he does. But my understanding is he took over after his mom. His mom, from what I hear, had a big heart and catered to those in the community that were of need. And hey, Carolyn. And Mike took over after that and has encountered some interesting resistance to his efforts to help people there in the community, for lack of a better way of saying that. And then I'm also joined by Pastor Will Shewey. And I know some of y'all are like, damn, Danny's got a pastor on. I do. And he's one of the pastors. He's one of the few pastors that I have an enormous amount of respect for, not only because of his heart and his service, but his lack of judgment of other people in terms of, kind of rebuking people or condemning people. Just his compassion is phenomenal. And it's one of the things that makes my heart happy. You don't see that in a lot of churches today. And we do see that with Pastor Will at Shades of Grace, which is a United Methodist Church. And so I am very thrilled to have both of them with me. They both do a lot in the local community there when it comes to homelessness. So I want to give you guys a little bit of backdrop, because one of the reasons this came onto my radar, what's up, Teresa? How are you? One of the reasons this came up on my radar is because if you all saw, Tennessee has expanded a law that they first passed in 2020, and in reference to camping or sleeping on public property. And I'm going to give you a little bit about that. But before I dive in, because I'll get my hand smacked for not doing this, you guys know that we are putting together a talk show where we actually will film for 3 days in front of a live studio audience. I have lined up guests and speakers, and all of that requires flying people in and hotel costs and all of that. So if you would like to become a corporate sponsor, if you would like to donate, if you would like to find out how to get tickets, you can do all of those things at The Danny Cook Show, or you can go to the GoFundMe, which is gofund.me, and then /The Danny Cook Show. Okay. So, the idea for me is to be able to do what I do right here on Facebook and on YouTube and do it on a larger deal, right? With a distribution deal and potentially a cable deal. So we'll just see how all that works out. I don't get into those conversations. Other people handle that. All I do is do what I do and talk about the things that I believe matter not only to me, but matter to you. And hopefully we can create a world that is in better shape than we are currently in. Okay. So now that I have done my due diligence, it goes into effect on July 1st from what I read. Yeah, I read July 1st. Hey, what's up, Nikki? So let me just back up. How many of you all know why this law happened in the first place? In 2020, do you all know why this law was created in the state of Tennessee? That you could not camp on. And at that time, the original law was you cannot camp or be overnight on state-owned property. Do you know why that law was first passed in 2020? Anybody want to take a guess? Anybody? I'm going to show you a picture, and this is why. You ready? This is why. Do you all remember that in 2020, there were a lot of racial social justice, Pastor Jones, right? Justin Jones was down there, and they were wanting, right, Kren, they were wanting Governor Bill Lee to do something about the killing of unarmed Black people and social justice and racial justice issues. And there were overnight protests happening on the steps at the Capitol, as you can see right here. And so the state of Tennessee decided, well, here's what we'll do. We'll make the exercise of free speech, we'll make these people's efforts at exercising their constitutional rights, we'll make it illegal. And as a matter of fact, we'll make it a felony. Now, why is that important? Because what happens when you're a felon? You can't vote, right? So this is why this started back then. I know a little bit something about this because the City of Kingsport created an ordinance to end my protest that was outside of Ballard Health at Holston Valley Medical Center. So that's where it started. If you will remember, when we were outside at Ballard Health, hold on, I got to pull this down. You will remember that in 2019, another interesting thing happened in the City of Kingsport. Do y'all remember this? We went national. We went national when the City of Kingsport decided to add blocks to these benches. And what they claimed is that this was going to deter crime. Now, I don't know anybody that's stealing from the wooden benches in the parks and public places, but the city claimed that this effort was to curb and to deter crime from happening. In my opinion, this was specifically directed at homeless people. Having lived in the city and seen things that were done, they are not a fan of our homeless community and don't speak very highly of them. And when I say they, I'm specifically talking about city leadership and those who are in certain organizations and in certain positions who hold positions of power where they can control and dictate things like this. If you remember, at that time, a FOIA request was sent to the City of Kingsport. And that FOIA request uncovered Mayor Pat Scholl saying, Chris being Chris McCart, the city manager in Kingsport, I support the quote unquote bum bars. I just wanted you to know that my email traffic is increasing about this in particular and homelessness in general, Pat. And that was sent from his iPhone. So the things that I want to talk about tonight with Michael Gillis from Hunger First and Pastor Will Shewey at Shades of Grace are some of the myths and misconceptions around homelessness. Their thoughts with regard to this law and how it impacts the lives of people. What seems to be the apparent attitude of leadership towards homelessness and people who are unhomed. This new law that has been passed and the impact that we think it's going to have, and that it could possibly have coming May 1st. And then, the need for more homeless shelters, mental health services, things of that nature. And I want to have a conversation with these guys. So without further ado, I'm going to bring on Michael Gillis and Pastor Will Shewey. So thank you guys for joining me tonight. I'm so happy. Like Pastor Will, when I hit you up the other day and I was like, hey, like I'm going to have Michael Gillis on and we're going to talk about homelessness. Would you consider coming on? it made my heart really happy because what this forum, in my opinion, does is it highlights two sides of similar efforts, different ways of doing things, and different reactions from leadership and government and cities and individuals. So I know, Pastor Will, you're going to be talking about it from a pastor's perspective. And Teresa says, "Hi, Pastor Will." A lot of people have been so excited about seeing you guys tonight. So I'm going to take a second and I'll let you take a minute to introduce yourselves and tell people a little bit about why you wanted to do this broadcast and what you hope people get out of it. And Michael, I'll let you go first.
Well, Michael Gillis, Hunger First, as so many know, but I was pretty excited about coming on here, just because, just of course, especially of the last things, the past few things that have been going on with us. But, the reason why Mom started Hunger First was, and her and the people that were with her, was mainly because it was almost like a group effort. And this was way before Shewey came in with Shades of Grace, that quite honestly, none of the churches were doing what they said that they were doing. And my mom noticed that because, like, the first person I was introduced was Sherry Harris. That was the first person that I got to meet when my mom was doing this. So, and so it was just, I don't know. I'm trying to find the balance in words that I want to say. So, but I've been doing this 8 years now. My mother was killed in a car accident in 2014, and that's when I took over. But I have found that you're right. There are more people that are in power that are spending more money to perpetuate homelessness, honestly, if you would, instead of solving the issue. You give on an average, it's $50,000 to $100,000 per person, possibly spend yearly. But that was, homelessness and those in need has just been the basics of what we do, quite honestly. And we cover a gamut. If somebody can't help, we step in. If and most of the people, quite honestly, more than 3/4 of the people that we help, especially our homeless, have either burned the bridge, burned their bridges at other places, and and are just, people just don't have the patience for them.
Yeah, they need something that, and that's the beauty though, is like we can't all do the same thing, and we can't all cover the same people. So Pastor Will, share a little bit with the people about Shades of Grace and what you do, and your contact on a daily basis with the homeless community.
Thank you, Danny. And Michael, it's good to see you tonight. And I'm glad to be able to share this space with you to let you know a little bit of what we do at Shades of Grace. And Michael mentioned 2014. That seems to be the good year because that is the year that I was appointed by the bishop and the annual conference of the United Methodist Church to start a church in Kingsport. And I was appointed to the streets of Kingsport. That was my appointment from the bishop. And this had not happened before, to my understanding, in the United Methodist Church, because typically pastors are sent to congregations that already exist in buildings that already exist. And so I was sent to the streets of Kingsport. So we have a lot in common in that we have both been doing this since 2014. And we moved to our permanent address in October of 2014. And we minister to those whom we refer to as the least of these. The Bible talks about the least, last, and lost, which are the widows, the orphans, and the strangers in the land. And we added a fourth L, and those are the lonely people. And we deal a lot with homelessness, but not exclusively with homeless. But we're finding ourselves more and more dealing with people who are on the very verge of becoming homeless. We give out emergency food boxes daily, just like Michael does, and we're finding more and more requests of those persons. And so part of my perspective tonight in sharing is, as a pastor, as a congregation, trying to determine how we can better help those who are already homeless and assist those from becoming homeless, because there are loads of people that are just ready to step off into the abyss of homelessness, and it's a hard road back once they've stepped off into that abyss.
So, people who have followed me for a long time or have tuned in frequently, they've heard me talk about when I lived in Charlotte, North Carolina. And check out the irony of this conversation. This was in 2014.
Wow.
Isn't this crazy? But
Amazing.
in April of 2014, I was sitting at my desk at work and I saw this video called Free Hugs. And it was from a guy down in Australia named Juan Man. And it was the official video that they did. Basically, the story is he's from Australia. He'd moved to London, and he came back home after, not being successful in what he wanted to achieve. And he didn't have any more money, didn't have family, didn't have whatever. And he gets to the airport and he's watching all of these other people get off the plane, and they're being hugged and they're being greeted by friends and family and people who are waiting for them. And he had no one to hug. So he ends up going across the street to the shopping center and getting this piece of cardboard, and with a black magic marker, he writes "free hugs" on it. And if you go to YouTube and you watch the official video, he looks like a modern day Jesus. He's kind of hippie with this long little wavy hair and this long coat. And as he's walking through with this free hug sign, people are looking at him like, dude's kind of weird. Don't think I want any of that. Some people are taking pictures. And then eventually one woman stops. And she goes, you literally watch her go, what the heck, right? And she hugs his neck. And it starts this hug fest to where everyone in the shopping center begins hugging everyone, to the degree that, get this, the shopping center actually banned hugging. Wow. And people had to do, they did a petition, and they got I don't know, thousands of signatures, and they ended up reinstituting it and say, yes, you can hug people. But so I went out into Charlotte, and I was I saw this video and I'm crying at my desk at work, and I'm like, I want to do this. And so I put it on Facebook and said, I want to do this here in Charlotte. Who wants to do it with me? And Mother's Day weekend, there were about, I don't know, 10 of us met uptown in uptown Charlotte. And we began to just walk around the city with these signs and t-shirts that said "free hugs." And at the corner of Trade and Tryon, that's where the majority of our homeless are, right? And so over the years, because we did this for years, I began to become very familiar with our homeless community in Charlotte. And so they'd either call me Danny or the Free Hugs Lady. That's how they knew me, the Free Hugs Lady. And then conversations started, and then I would take them to go buy pizza. And then it really elevated one Sunday. One Saturday I went out, and I just felt like this is not enough. I'm supposed to be doing something more. And so the very next day, that Sunday, I got a little check in my gut. And so I said, all right, God, we're going to head on out here. And so I grabbed a sign and I went up by myself, which I never do. And I met a guy who was new to the streets. And you could tell because he didn't look like everybody else. And I talked to them and his friend for, I don't know, an hour and a half, 2 hours. Long story short, then I ended up doing sleeping bags and backpacks and all this stuff. And then spent a weekend on the streets living with them. And then I ended up having 2 of them come live with me for about 6 months, while one of them went through 5 different surgeries and so forth and so on. So homelessness is something, before I left Charlotte, I was working with Senator Joel, gosh, I can see his face. I can't think of his name right now. Ford. And we were looking at how to do public lockers and things like that, things that down south we don't have that up north they do, right? So we can talk about that offline. But I'm finding the irony is that 2014 is when you took over, and when I started doing free hugs, which turned into also working with homeless people. How ironic is all that? So what I find amazing about what you all do is that I think, so this is just my personal opinion. I think Pastor Will, I think the city and the folks in town, I think you get grace because you're a church. And because you're affiliated with that, I think you don't get the same. And I think also that things are done a little bit differently between the two locations. I do think it buys you a little room, though. But the first thing that I want to ask both of you, and I'll start with Pastor Will, is what's your take on, what's your opinion on the law that has been passed, and how do you think it will impact the homeless community there and across the state?
Well, I've been trying to do a little bit of research on that recently, and I still have a lot of misgivings about it because I don't understand a lot of what I read. But the main thing that comes to me is, how is this going to help people by having them arrested and giving a felony on their record and then putting them in jail when the jails here are already filled to capacity and overflowing? And from our work, many of the people, I believe, to my understanding, are incarcerated for no other reason than they're unable to meet with their probation officers or to get to a place to do that. And many of them have served their time, they've paid for their crime, but they keep in the revolving door system because, for just a lack of being able to get to a probation officer or a report can go back. And we see this happening over and over and over.
Wow.
And with all the people that are becoming homeless and who are going to be homeless, it's only going to overload the legal systems a whole lot more, because we have people every day calling our church and inquiring about, where can a homeless person or a homeless family who's living in a car park for the night where it is safe. And so there's a whole lot more to this than what anybody is even thinking about. So that's my perspective on it at the moment. I'd like to hear more, what you folks have to say.
Yeah. So for those of you guys that are watching, this is my understanding, and you all tell me if this is your understanding as well. My understanding is that the original law in 2020 said, listen, it's a felony if you camp on state-owned property. And then that law was expanded to include any public-owned property, any publicly owned property like parks and so forth and so on, so even local property. And then they ended up adding a little an addendum to it, or they added it to say that it doesn't have to be a felony, although it can, and that you can be fined $50 or be made to do community service. And those are the things that I saw. And what bothers me about that is that these folks don't have anywhere to live. They don't have anywhere to bathe, to take care of themselves. And it feels like they're being punished for being poor or for being homeless. That's what it feels like to me. Michael, what are your thoughts?
So, I mean, there was a reason why Governor Lee allowed it to pass without signing it.
Yes.
And it's reminiscent to me of Pontius Pilate, and the same thing that Pontius Pilate did in the crucifixion of Jesus, to be quite honest with you, is that absolved him. That because if you listen to him, and when he talks about that particular bill going into law, he pompously smiles and says, I allowed it to pass without me signing it, and basically says, we're going to see what goes from there. So if you figure, if this law really goes, if it goes one way with the community service and et cetera, with the filing of, I guess you said a $50 fine or community service.
Yep, they can be fined for $50 or they can be made to do community service.
But up to 1 to 6 years in a federal penitentiary.
Yes.
If they choose to go the other route and, and becomes a felon. But the thing that to me this is only the beginning, because if we're and I'm speaking in terms of, so there's been a war against the poor for years, for decades.
Yeah.
Decades. And my mom used to talk about, Martin Luther King used to talk about it. He tried to explain it to people, and when he started changing his rhetoric, was speaking with his own culture, and then moved to in a book when he was in Alabama. It was called Why We Can't Wait. But in his very words, he tried to explain it to poor white people too, that they're coming for you. You just don't see it yet, because you think you're absolved. You believe you're absolved because of all this happening to us, but you believe you're absolved. And what I think this is the coming something bigger on a government level, that's going to move to where you have the haves and the have-nots. And
yeah, I think we're close to that. I think we're getting closer and closer to that. I'm with Pastor Will though. So like it's funny because I remember, I don't know if you remember Pastor Will, but when we were first outside of Holston Valley for a little bit, I'd come down to Shades of Grace. I brought somebody, it might have been the guy that had the sores on his legs and on his back and all of that. And so after we kind of took care of him, you and I were sitting around talking, and I said, they give me crap because I curse and they kind of belittle me and kind of demonize me. And that was the first non-judgmental religious conversation I'd had with a pastor in Northeast Tennessee. And I'm from there, right? But I've been around and watched your heart and how you do things and what you do with people. And as a pastor, I love the fact that you added the L, lonely, because I do think that plays a role. How much, you and I talked about this briefly, but how many misconceptions and myths do you think are out there around homelessness, and why people are homeless, or what homeless people are all about? And what do you think? How do you think those impact the way that we treat people, even politicians and legislators and these types of laws?
Well, as a pastor, I'm always going to have a scripture to back up what I say. It's just who I am. But when you mention that, I think of the story of the man called Legion that Jesus met, who lived among the tombs. Many of you might be familiar with that story. But he was tormented. He cut himself with stones. He raged violently. Nobody could hold him down with chains or ropes. He wore no clothing. He was just a man alone, a man without a country, a man without anyone. And so I guess the misconceptions to me are as legion, because for every person I meet, there's a different story. You can't really put anyone into a particular scenario or into a box, because everyone has his or her own story to tell as to how they ended up in homelessness. And a lot of people think, well, they're just lazy, they're bums. But I would encourage you and invite you to come and spend some time with me any day of the week, and just meet some of the folks that we know and that we meet and with whom we have formed relationships. And I often say, there's somewhere, this was somebody's little baby. This was someone who someone loved and cared for, but something happened. We have a lady right now who walks the streets, and she comes to our door 5 and 6 times a day. She used to be a productive citizen, a mother, a wife with a husband, children, and her parents live not very far from Kingsport, and he himself is a retired probation or parole officer, and they've come and talked with me many times. But this lady, she won't talk, rarely ever will speak, but they brought, and we try to never give money to anyone. We send them to resources to meet their needs without giving money that could be somehow fall into the wrong hands for abuse. But these parents left us with a sum of cash because she won't talk to her parents. She won't talk to anyone. And every Thursday, we will offer her $20, which doesn't seem like much. But today, we offered her the money 3 different times when she passed by, and she just looked at us and turned and walked away without saying a word. And you tell me what you think about someone who wouldn't take $20.
Right.
Is that a normal person? Is that someone who thinks like you and I? That, and this person can easily just walk across the street in front of vehicles. She doesn't look. This is just one of the many of Legion that we love and we know, and we pray for them, and we minister to them. And Michael mentioned Sherry Harris a few moments ago, and she was a person that we all knew in the streets, and she struggled, and we loved her, and we did her funeral. How long ago, Michael? Since
it's probably
maybe
about
3 or 4
months. About probably about that.
And Michael came to Shades, and he participated and spoke at the funeral. And we had a standing room only crowd of people from the community, knowing who she was, but they loved her, and they tried to understand her and embrace her as she is one of us, regardless of what we want to say about it. We're all connected together as the family of God. So if we don't like it, it's too bad.
So when you said it was standing room only, one of the things that really bothers me is that we seem to have great compassion after they're dead, after there's trauma, after there's a shooting. We seem to have this great ability to have this compassion afterwards, but not when people are going through it. So one of the reasons I brought Mike and Mark to live with me is that after the weekend that I spent on the streets with them in Charlotte, I chose February, really? First weekend of February, 2014. I took $20 and my ID and my bank card in case of an emergency in a Ziploc bag, put it in my backpack, took my sleeping bag and doubled up, layered my clothes. Because here's the thing, they didn't have coats, so I didn't take a coat. I wanted to go out there and meet them where they were. And I asked permission first, and they said yes. So I took the train to Uptown and went out and spent the weekend with them, and I ate what they ate, lived where they lived, did what they did, slept under the awning of the United Way with a piece of cardboard under us. And they were so funny. The guys were so great. They were like, Danny, you go, like they had me up against the wall. And then Mark was here and Mike was here to make sure. So if somebody was coming, they would have to go through both of them to get to me. And then so shortly after this experience with the two of them, Mike's colon ruptured, and they called me from the hospital. And when he was going to be discharged, he had his stomach couldn't close back up because of the air and everything. And he had a wound vac, and it just wasn't good. And I knew they had a codependent relationship, right? But they needed each other. So to keep them together, I had a little duplex I was renting at the time. So I put 2 little twin beds, some high school students that I did seminars with and workshops, they donated the beds and we set them up. And so literally I changed colostomy bags, and I'll never forget taking their shoes off, because when you're homeless, your feet do not get the care that they need. Right. And so I took their shoes off and soaked their feet and clipped their nails. And Mike cried with his face turned to the side. And I said, what's wrong? And he said, he did the same thing the first time I changed his colostomy bag. He said, I'm sorry. And I said, why are you apologizing? He said, because I know it stinks. And I said, well, guess what? My shit stinks too. It's okay. Like everybody's shit stinks. And when you say we are all connected, we really are. And I don't know why we can't see each other. But, Mike told me he was a Vietnam vet. My daddy's a Vietnam vet. Come to find out after all of this, it wasn't true. He wasn't a veteran, right? He was an alcoholic. He'd lied about his son wasn't killed by a drunk driver. His son was still alive. And people asked me, aren't you angry? And I said, no, I'm not angry. But you fed him and you did this and you took him to surgeries. And I said, but here's the thing. I said, you guys want me to be mad about someone lying. Here's what I would ask you. How low, how lonely, how distraught must someone be? How desperate must you be to lie and say your son was killed by a drunk driver to try to get someone's compassion and someone's attention? How bad does it have to be for that to be the life you choose? And that's what happens when you said when people become invisible and once they get into homelessness, it's hard to get out. And I think that's something that people don't understand. So like in Charlotte, there are some shelters, if you've had a place to stay, you're not considered homeless again until you've been on the streets for 30 days. And there are some shelters you won't qualify for. You can only stay in shelters for so long. They have a lottery system when it gets cold. And what I'm always baffled by are all the empty freaking buildings that we have in small towns like Kingsport and Bristol and in big cities like Charlotte and Atlanta. But we can't seem to do what's necessary to give these people what they need. So let me ask this, because we were talking about myths and misconceptions, and you're talking about people think they're lazy. What I've experienced is people also think that all of them are addicts, or they all have this, but from what I've seen is, sure, are there some people that are addicts? Yep. Are there some people with mental health issues? Right. Yes. Right. But there are also, people don't realize that homelessness includes when you just, are sleeping in your car or you're couch surfing with your friends. And, there's lots of ways that homelessness shows up. So Mike, if you were going to share with people, because you were arrested, yeah. And I'm not going to ask you a lot about your court case because I know that you're appealing it. But from what I read, you had allowed some guys to sit on the steps or sleep on the stoops at Hunger First, and you had gone to run an errand, come back and found that the police were there telling the people that they had to leave your property. And somehow, like when you pulled up, you literally just pulled up and parked in the street and jumped out because people were being questioned by the police. I've seen that video. I chose not to show it tonight because you do have a court case going on, but you subsequently ended up being arrested and charged with 3 or 4 different things. Four. Yeah. Do you feel like, and I'll share my opinion when I'm done, but do you feel like Hunger First has been targeted by the city of Kingsport in recent years?
Pastor, I'm going to respect you and not say what I was going to say, but absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Because here's the thing, what people don't understand when they seen that video, they just see this guy pull up and jump out of his car and start ranting. What the people don't know is it was a matter of 2 years plus. It was minute after minute, hour after hour, month after month, week after week. And for the past year, but in the last months, leading up to me taking my mother's ashes back to California, and then me coming back, not even 2 weeks after me coming back was when it happened. And the reason, so I'll just throw this out there. When I pulled up, and when I pulled up, it was bringing trays back because it was Thursday. It was feeding day. I went to get trays. I told the guys to stay there, especially Roger, Vietnam vet, can't even hardly walk, let alone with a cane. But they told me, they said they were running them out of alleyways, running them wherever they were staying. They were running them off. All they wanted to do was rest. So you have a middle-aged guy and a 60-year-old plus guy, close to 70. Those guys were just dead tired. And I said, you know what? Stay here. I'm going to go get trays. If you have any issues, holler at Karen. Karen will call me. That's what she did. She called me. I was on my way back. My usual route when I come back to bring trays is I come around the curve and I stop at the alleyway, which there's no yellow line. Okay. But right. Here's the gig. Here's the kicker. Over the past 2 years in working with the City of Kingsport, doing all this, dancing the dance, talking with the people, and this and that and the other, with those city officials, you know, and this includes when we had the big. You remember when we had the big meeting at the church, Will, when everybody about homelessness and up at the
yes,
church
First
circle?
Broad Street, United Methodist.
Yeah,
Yes.
and that went on, and Police Chief Quillen came down to look at our place because there was a lot of people speaking up, and I said, well, what if there was a nonprofit here that wanted to step up and do what you asked? Because Miles Burdine said the City of Kingsport, the businesses were complaining about all this, that, and the other, you know, excrement and da-da-da-da-da. Well, they had these meetings, but anyways, let me move forward with that because that will take a long time. So,
you came back. Yeah. So
when
you came back. Go ahead.
When I parked, my immediate thoughts were, hey, I've met with Police Chief Quillen, you know, because I already knew what it was about. They were saying that it was something else. The City of Kingsport was saying it was something else. The police department was saying something else, that it was the reason it was a routine check or something like that. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking, so leading up to that point, the reason why I parked the way I did was throw on my flashers. I parked far enough away. We were in the pandemic, parked far enough away where I was letting the officer know that I was no threat. I walked around to the back of my car when I approached him. And yes, I was a little irate. However, I don't believe that's against the law. So what it boils down to, brass tacks, is what it boils down to is the fact they have been doing this for a very long time. And you're right, we have been targeted. We're still targeted. There was an uptick in arrest after we closed down.
Yeah.
They've been knocking on the doors. I'm sorry, I could go on forever.
Yeah. So here's the thing that I see is that, so I think it's okay. So this is the Bible Belt, right? This is the Bible Belt. And many of the leaders.
Pastor Shewey doesn't treat it that way, though.
Oh, I know he doesn't. Listen, there are people who follow me that say, I've never been to Kingsport, but I just want to meet Will Shewey because I speak very highly of Pastor Will and what happens at Shades of Grace. But so this is the Bible Belt, and so many people in leadership positions, the governor included, and the mayor included, talk about being such good Christians. But the actions that are taken against the least of us, and when I say the least of us, I hate that term because I think it's bullshit. I think that's a societal hierarchy and status. But to those who have the least, who are lonely, who are lost, and who don't feel loved, and for me, remind me to come back to the loved part, okay? But when I look at these actions that are being done, they don't want them in the streets because that's downtown, and they don't want the model city to look like it has a bunch of homeless people, even though it does, right? Rather than actually fix the core of what's going on, they would rather criminalize the symptoms of what's happening. And to me, that's not Christianity. That's not what God says do. That's not what Jesus would have us do. I said this last night. I firmly believe that if Jesus were walking the earth right now, he would walk into many of these churches, most of these churches, and turn the tables over and say, what are you doing? I really do 100% believe that. And that bothers me. So what do you do? So let me ask, because you guys would probably know, and I don't know. I saw this organization called the Kingsport Homeless Ministry. And the only thing that I could find about it was that a guy by the name of Don Royston is the treasurer, and that they had a fundraising goal of $600,000. They've raised 70% of that, right? According to a news report from October or November of last year. So let me just do 600,000 times 70%. So they've raised $420,000. They bought this building that's back behind China Walk, right? Sullivan Street. And they were supposed to be back in October 29th of 2021, advertising for an executive director and so forth and so on. But I haven't seen anything else since then. Do either of you guys know where we are in getting a homeless shelter, or that homeless shelter getting up and running and functioning?
Well, Danny, I can say I did serve on the board for Kingsport Homeless Ministry, Inc. And earlier, maybe in February or March, I offered my resignation because I had served for about 3 years since they began efforts. And I have nothing negative to say about them. I think they're great people trying to do a noble thing, and I believe they will succeed. I do. They're trying to get more and more churches on board. It is a faith-based organization. They're strictly depending upon the Christians and the churches to support this. So I'm not in the loop right now to give any kind of information because I don't know. I'm no longer a part of the board. But I'm hoping that everything will come together so that they will be able to be open before cold weather again this year. Yes. That's about the best I can say.
So one of the things that I will offer to you that might be useful if you know the folks that are running it is, it would be great on the website if under the about section, it listed who the board members are, because it doesn't. And so the only thing that I could find was Royston's information, Don's information. And I was like, but I want to know who this is. And I want to know who's on the board, and I want to know who's organizing it. The other thing that I know this is not related, but what kind of irritates me a little bit is, so because this is my own personal opinion, I feel like because they are a faith-based ministry and because it's incorporating churches and so forth, they were able to raise damn near $500,000. And Michael just needed sprinklers put in, right? So that people could safely sleep there in the cold of the winter. And it was what, $1,500 that you needed for the sprinklers?
No.
Tell me what it was. No, I don't know the number.
The number was a little over 30. The number was a little over 30,000.
Okay, but still, okay, I don't care because they raised almost $500,000.
Right.
Right. And so I think there's this thing. So this is the other frustration that I think happens, is that if the people who are homeless don't subscribe to a way of belief, and this is not at Shades of Grace, but I'm just talking about in other organizations and places that I've seen, there seems to be less support in efforts to help. And every single one of us probably watching and on here, we know that there are people in Kingsport that 30 grand is a drop in the bucket. And if they wanted to help, they could have done that. What I saw was a deliberate attempt to shut down Hunger First right there on Center Street because it was an eyesore to the city. And that's why the cops sat across the damn street in the parking lot waiting to issue citations and tickets and things like that. That's what I saw. And that's just my personal opinion on that. Okay, so circling back around. So we don't know where they're at right now. It may open. And from what I read, it's going to have 35 to 40 beds, part for women, part for men. It will not have a kitchen, and it will not it won't accommodate families if and when it gets open. How many people would you all guesstimate we have homeless in the city?
Go ahead, Will.
Well, I know the PIT, P-I-T, which is called Point in Time, count is made every year in January. And it's usually done during the coldest time of year. And they do a count. And as you were talking earlier about all the things that causes a person to actually be homeless or to not be considered homeless, there were certain restrictions and qualifications. It's like a census for homelessness is the best way I can describe it. And there were several places, Shades of Grace being one of those places, where we could ask questions and help the folks fill out just a simple questionnaire without using their name and to get a count. And honestly, it seems to me, and I may be totally off the wall on this, Michael or someone else may know better than I, but it seems to me that it's been pretty consistent in the last years that I've known anything about the pit count, and somewhere in the neighborhood of 120 to 140 or so. But that does not include the school children, from what I understand, because there were more than that in the Kingsport City school system of children who were considered homeless. So, it's really a hard thing to say. The only thing I can tell you is from our perspective as a congregation, we are seeing more and more people becoming homeless and on the verge of homelessness, including children and families. So the number is not going to decrease.
Yeah, I will tell you this. My last year in Charlotte, the number of children considered homeless in Mecklenburg County school systems was 4,500. That was in 2017, 4,500 children. And so like when people think that this is just something that happens because, and I hear people say, well, they knew better than to make this choice, or they shouldn't have tried that. Listen, none of us are perfect. This idea that you have to be the perfect victim in order to deserve help is just beyond me, especially when it comes from people who profess to be Christian, because like the whole idea behind Jesus and Christianity is grace, for goodness sake. The whole idea is none of us are perfect. We all sin. We all fall short. And that's the whole reason that Jesus crawled up on the cross and died, right? Like that's the crux of it. And why do we, when I say we, I definitely don't mean me, but why do we as society withhold compassion? We withhold grace. We withhold forgiveness, and we condemn and we shame, thinking that something good is going to be birthed from that. Go ahead, Michael.
I have an answer for that, because we expect us out of them every single time. The majority of people expect what they can do, what their abilities are, what they're capable of, or if they've been through something, they think they're the end all, be it all, know it all. And so well, I can do it. If I can do it, you can do it too, kind of BS. So
what I think is, I think that people shame other people in the areas where they're vulnerable. It's easy to shame someone else in order to elevate yourself, especially if it just wasn't you, but it could be the majority of us. And so people have asked me, a friend of mine even put up a post because they were doing some more homeless work in Charlotte. And somebody asked me, well, what do homeless people need the most? Right. And people were like, oh, they need this. Oh, they need that. They need sleeping bags and they need socks and they do need all of those things. Right. But I said, this was my response. You can give a homeless person any of that stuff, right? You can give them socks. You can give them hygiene kits. You can give them sleeping bags, backpacks. You can even give them a job and an apartment. And if that individual does not believe that they are worthy of those things, if they do not believe that they are loved and that they deserve it, they will mess it up. They will mess it up. And that's just human nature. When we don't believe that we deserve good things, we mess up the good things. And so the best thing, and to me, the thing that we have to give homeless people and each other is love. We have to be able to say, you are worthy of being loved. You are lovable just like you are. And that used to be something that I would say. Yeah, there are things about me that are lovable, but I don't know that I'm worth loving. And until I learned that, it had hindered what I was even able to receive in my life. And I think that that's a part that we are all missing. So when I look at this law that's been passed, and it's going to be left up to the local authorities how they enforce it, and I see what they did before they had the legal right to, and I see how they've acted prior to this law, I'm concerned. You mentioned Miles Burdine earlier, and I want to touch on this before we wrap up. But you mentioned Miles Burdine, talking about, people were complaining and this, that, and the other. And in my case, when the City of Kingsport created the ordinance specifically targeting our peaceful protest, the emails were between Miles Burdine, Bob Feathers, Pat Scholl, Chris McCart, and they were in this FOIA request where the bum bars email was discovered. There was another email also amongst these group of people, but it was Bob Feathers who was talking about homeless people, and one of his suggestions was withholding food, withholding stuff from them until they receive mental health treatment. Mm-hmm. And there's this, and I've heard them say that the reason you have so many people homeless is because you help them too much. This idea that your charity is toxic. So I would like for each of you to just address that in with a 1 or 2 minute response. And I'll start with Michael. I'm on time you too, because you can talk like
I
me.
know I go too far. But anyways, so yeah, I believe the entire BMA has a toxic charity kind of ideology, and I believe it was taught to them. So absolutely. And I believe that whole withholding food and whatnot, it was the same thing as before we did housing first, before that was implemented, because they had the same thing with housing. Make sure they get clean first, or they get the mental help, and they consistently do that until they can receive housing. But now we have those that are pushing for housing first. The ideology behind 30 seconds left. The ideology behind that is, you can't, it's not a one size fit all. There was somebody that just made a post made a statement, said, I wish all the organizations would work together. It's not going to happen, because we are all supposed to be where we're supposed to be. And I was also told by somebody in the nonprofit realm, somebody else years ago, you want to know why there's never going to be a coalition? Because of money. There's too much money involved. Really? But I digress. So the situation with the toxic charity, too benevolent, as I was told by Mr. McCart, that's the reason why we have the problem that we have today. That's the reason why Hunger First was put out. That they have such, like, just to add on to what you were talking about, the monetary status. If it was Kingsport's goal to bring us to our knees, both physically, mentally, emotionally, and definitely financially, they've brought it to the levee, because people equate not having a building
to not being there,
with not being there, with actually being shut down. And when I say there's no such thing as too benevolent, when I say that there is no such thing as, if you practice the Jesus walk, as my mother used to say, if you practice the Jesus walk, then how many times is enough? It's never enough helping them, because they're always going to need you. All you have to know is just how to gradually give them enough leverage. I mean, enough space to when you finally see them take off on their own.
Yeah.
But give them grace at the same time, and love.
So let me share this with you. So the only thing that I would have offered to you, because this is something you can ask the people that were at the camp with me, right? When we were protesting outside of Holston Valley, I used to say, listen, make sure we don't leave any like when we left that property, and it was the public right of way. When we left, we reseeded the ground. We put down hay. Now Ballard tore it all up afterwards, but we reseeded it. We left it like with fresh grass and took pictures to cover our ass. But the only thing that I would have offered to you was I think that they would have had a lesser leg to stand on if, even when the folks were out front and things like that, they participated in keeping it look a certain way, because the aesthetics is what the city cares about. it's the aesthetics. And so that would have been my only. So when you get your next building, not if, but when you get your next building, that would be the one thing that I would say is the people who come, yes, be benevolent and benevolent with responsibility that, hey, if this is if we are your safe haven, then help me keep the city from being able to come at us for any small thing. That would be the only thing that I would offer. Pastor Will, I'll let you respond now.
Okay. We've talked a lot about buildings tonight. And let me just remind us again from the beginning, I told you my appointment is from the Bishop of the United Methodist Church. And I was appointed to the streets of Kingsport without a building. And we find it much easier to have a building. And we're grateful that now we own 5 buildings in Kingsport. And we haven't had to pay for any of them. That's the important thing about it, to do ministry. But Jesus said, and here I am as a pastor preaching, but this coming Sunday, we celebrate Pentecost, which is really considered the birthday of the church in the world. And Jesus said, upon this rock, I build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. And so we don't need buildings to have church. You read accounts in the New Testament, they met by the river, they met on the mountains, in the desert, wherever. The Lord said, wherever 2 or more gather, that's church. And so I want to commend Michael. I tell him often that Michael is as much, in my opinion, a pastor as I am. He may have not been to seminary. He may not have been ordained as I have been through the United Methodist Church, but Michael is a shepherd. That's what the word pastor means. Michael is a shepherd to the people who God has called him to care for. And so the poor we will always have with us. Jesus said that. And so just be careful, because most of us can only be just a few paychecks away from being in the streets and being homeless. And let us just love one another, pray for one another. The Bible says love covers a multitude of sins. And let's just learn to accept one another and care about one another. Because Jesus said, if we can't love the people we see every day, then how can we even proclaim that we love a God that we don't see? So that's my sermon for tonight.
and
he goes out with a bang.
And but so this is the thing that I love, because the reason that I can hear Pastor Will, and when he talks, I don't go, ugh. The reason why is because he lives what he says. Right? That's the thing for me. You can quote scripture at me all damn day. I know the Bible too, believe it or not, with my heathen ass. But I don't care how many scriptures you can quote. I want to know, are you living it? Do you care about people? Are you doing your level best to exude compassion? And I think one of the reasons I get so angry at what Christianity is being used for in this country now is because it has nothing to do with Jesus, and it represents everything that Christ stood for, and it misrepresents it. And so it angers me, I think, because as a little girl, I can remember growing up going to Lee Street Baptist Church, and on Sunday mornings feeling like I was just being drugged to the altar, like just being drugged. And so, like, I know God, and I know the heart of God, and I know the heart of Jesus, and I definitely know the Spirit of God. And I see it missing from so many institutions, organizations, and politicians who fly it high as a banner while they implement things that hurt people. We could go on and on forever, but we're past our time. So let me just say this as I wrap up. Michael, I wish you well in your appeal. I really do. I'm so glad Spivey's got you. I'm a fan of Spivey King and Spivey.
That's good people, man.
Yeah, they do the right thing. And so couple of notes. So Hunger First has a Facebook page. If you are interested in contacting Michael Gillis on Hunger First and offering any type of assistance, donation, or supplies, or any of that good stuff, reach out to him on Facebook at the Hunger First page, and you can do that. Pastor Will Shewey is with the Shades of Grace, a United Methodist Church congregation, I think is the long Facebook title that's there. They do an online sermon and broadcast every week. So you can go to church even without being in the building. If you have heard Pastor Will and what he says resonates with you, whether you're a Christian, not Christian, whatever, if you just want to go hear someone that talks about love and compassion and goodness and kindness and grace and love and passion, mercy and all of that, then you can log in on Sundays. If you want to help Pastor Will and all the things that they do for people who are homeless, who aren't homeless, for people in the community, children, moms, dads, all of those individuals, you can hit them up also on Facebook and donate there. I appreciate both of you all because you're in a tough spot in our region and a lot of the stuff that happens. And I'm concerned about what this new law will do and how it will impact people, especially with the way that inflation and life is happening. It seems to me that politicians are sold out for the money and have left public service behind. And that's a shame because people deserve better. I appreciate everybody for tuning in tonight. Like I said, you know how to contact those guys. One more time, if you are interested in helping put together the talk show, then you can go to the Danny Cook. What am I talking about? TheDannyCookShow.com. You can also go to the GoFundMe for the Danny Cook Show, and you can donate. You can be a corporate sponsor. You can get tickets to the live studio audience. When I went to the studio a week and a half ago, they said they want to start filming in 6 to 8 weeks. So that's why you see a big push now for fundraising. So I appreciate the two of you all. Maybe we'll do this again and tackle some more stuff around those issues. Anything you guys want to say before we go?
Thank you. God bless you, Michael. God bless you, Danny. God bless everybody who joined us tonight. And let's just all keep the main thing the main thing.
Absolutely. Thank you, Will. Love you, Danny. Always loved you, man. So you keep it up. You continue what you're doing.
Right back at you guys. All right. Love you guys very much. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you all next week. Peace.